Before we get into the video, could everyone please subscribe to my Endless Diary Tales channel? Thank you so much. In the 1970s, in a small town called Rosefield, Eric Thompson told me to give up my job as a sales clerk at the cooperative so that his widowed sister-in-law, Hannah Collins, could take it. He promised that he would take care of me for the rest of my life. But when my little sister Lucy wanted to go to school and I begged him to use his salary to pay her tuition, he said, "Hannah's kids don't have a father. They're pitiful. My salary should be saved for their education." Before my father passed away, he transferred his job at the cooperative to me. He held my hand in Lucy's, his eyes filled with tears. "Your mother and I won't be here anymore," he said softly. "From now on, you two must live well. The job at the cooperative will belong to your older sister, and her salary will support the younger one's schooling. Don't fight with each other. The older sister must protect her little sister, and the younger one must understand her sister. Do you both remember?" Lucy and I each held one of his hands, crying so hard we couldn't speak. But in the end, his warm hand slowly turned cold. After Father passed away, I packed our things and decided to rent out the small house the cooperative had assigned to our family. That way, I could save the rent money for Lucy's college education. Just then Eric brought Hannah over. "Anna," he said, "your father's gone now. It's a waste to let this house sit empty. My sister-in-law has 2 kids and nowhere to go. Why not let her move in?" I looked up at him and said, "This house was left to me and Lucy by my father." Eric grew impatient. "Lucy's still a child. You really want to leave her here alone? How about this? Let her come live with us and Hannah can move into this house. It's better than paying someone else to look after the place. Hannah can take care of it for you and she won't even charge rent." A bitter smile appeared on my lips. "When I rent the house out," I said coldly, "the tenant takes care of it and pays me $3 a month." Eric's face turned pale. Hannah suddenly covered her face and started crying. "Come on, Anna," she whimpered. "You don't even have a job. How could you afford to pay $3 a month in rent? Maybe you should just go back to your parents' home. So what if your mother scolds or hits you? You probably deserve it." Eric immediately pulled Hannah close and gave me a cold order. "I'm your husband and I make the decisions in this house. Clean the place up and give me the keys. Tomorrow we'll help my sister-in-law move in." I looked at him silently, then turned around and continued cleaning. Eric thought my silence meant agreement and left happily with Hannah. As their figures grew smaller in the distance, my eyes burned, but not a single tear fell. Ever since his cousin died, hit by a train while stealing coal, Eric had poured all his attention into Hannah and her 2 children. He said they didn't have enough to eat. So, the rice and milk powder my father had sent to nourish me all went to Hannah because of malnutrition and anemia. I lost the baby I was 2 months pregnant with. He said Hannah and her children didn't have warm clothes for winter. So the 3 padded jackets and 3 pairs of cotton shoes I had just finished sewing were all given to them. My little sister had to wear thin shoes in the freezing cold, her small feet covered in frostbite. And now he wanted to give away even the house my father had left for us. But this time I refused to yield. I brought Lucy home and made rice cake soup. 2 bowls, one for her and one for me. There was none for Eric. After all, he no longer came home for dinner. Eric worked as an accountant at the slaughterhouse, a job full of hidden perks. My father had used his connections to get Eric the job. He never asked for anything in return. He only wanted me, by following Eric Thompson, to be able to eat a little more meat. But ever since Hannah Collins became a widow, Eric hadn't brought home any meat for an entire year. The slaughterhouse often distributed scraps, pig heads, blood or intestines, and every time Eric would take them straight to Hannah's house. Of course, she would keep him there for dinner afterward. Today was no different. The slaughterhouse had handed out a rare piece of pig liver. Eric seemed to forget that I was anemic and needed liver the most. Without a second thought, he carried it over to Hannah's place. When he came home, he still smelled faintly of spinach and pork liver soup. He saw Lucy and me sitting there eating our plain rice cake soup, and a flicker of guilt flashed across his eyes. He hesitated for a moment before mumbling. "Hannah said she's been feeling dizzy lately. She's probably anemic, so I gave her the liver first. Next time the slaughterhouse gives more, I'll definitely bring it home." I nodded without saying a word and lowered my head to keep eating. Silent tears slipped down the corners of my eyes. When Father was still alive, Mom used to make rice cake soup for me with a bit of pork fat. The soup smelled rich and the rice cakes were soft and delicious. But ever since Hannah Collins became a widow, I hadn't had a single taste of pork fat. Every bit that came from the slaughterhouse, Eric took straight to Hannah. After dinner, Eric lingered in the kitchen as if he had something to say. I put down my chopsticks and turned to look at him. He hesitated for a while before finally speaking. "Mom's been nagging again," he said quietly. "She wants us to have a baby soon. I think your health isn't great. How about letting my sister-in-law take over your job at the cooperative? I already talked to her. From now on, she'll give you $10 out of her $30 salary each month. That way you can rest at home and focus on your pregnancy. She'll also have a job to support her 2 kids." I stared at him blankly and asked, "Then what about Lucy's education?" Eric blurted out, "Don't I still have my own salary?" A cold smile crossed my lips. "Your salary? Haven't you already given all of it to Hannah Collins?" Eric's expression turned awkward, and he lowered his voice. "It won't be like that anymore. Once you give your job at the cooperative to Hannah, she'll have her own income. She won't need my help." Then I looked at the man who was supposed to be my husband, my heart heavy with sorrow. "So what you mean?" I said quietly. "Is that I should give up my job, the $30 a month my father left me, just so Hannah can have it, and in exchange you'll bring home your salary again?" "Eric Thompson, on what grounds? The job at the cooperative was passed down to me by my father. Why should I give it up to Hannah Collins? You're my husband. Your salary is supposed to belong to me. Since when did your salary become hers?" Eric's face darkened, his patience snapping into anger. "You know very well that my cousin once saved my life. And Hannah, she's been my friend since elementary school. Now that my cousin's gone, we should be looking after her more." I cut him off sharply. "You should look after her, not me. Her husband is dead. But that doesn't give her the right to steal mine." With a sharp sound, Eric slapped me hard across the face. Lucy suddenly ran out from the bedroom, shoving Eric backward with all her strength. Like a small wolf baring its teeth for the first time, she stood protectively in front of me. "Don't you dare hit my sister," she shouted. Eric froze, startled back to his senses. His face went pale with panic. "Anna, I'm sorry. I didn't mean it," he stammered. "You just said something too harsh. Hannah and I are innocent. Don't let your imagination run wild. And those words you just said, don't ever repeat them. If people hear them, how will Hannah ever be able to hold her head up again?" I lowered my head and said nothing. Eric softened his voice, speaking to me gently. "Anna, the job at the cooperative is too tiring. Your health isn't strong enough to handle it. Let Hannah take it. You can rest at home, take care of your body, and give me a healthy baby boy. Don't worry, I'll take care of you. You'll never have to worry again." "All right." I kept shaking my head. "No, I can give up anything else, but not my job. That position at the cooperative was passed down to me by my father. If Hannah Collins wants a job, she can go ask her own father for one." A bitter thought crossed my mind. Hannah's parents were farmers in the village. They didn't have official jobs, let alone any kind of position like this. And even if they did, her family valued sons over daughters. She had 3 younger brothers. Even if jobs were being handed out, they would never go to a married daughter like her. Seeing that I refused to yield, Eric's face darkened. His tone turned cold as he threatened me. "If you won't give your job at the cooperative to Hannah, then I'll give her my job at the slaughterhouse instead." I turned my head away and muttered, "Do what you want." Eric slammed the door and stormed off. I watched his back disappear down the narrow road leading to Hannah's house, then bit my lip, took Lucy by the hand, and walked to Mrs. Lewis's home, the supervisor of the cooperative. I knew her niece had been wanting to get into the cooperative. And when Mrs. Lewis heard that I was willing to sell my position, she was overjoyed. She asked me to wait at her house. Not long after, she returned with her brother and her niece. Jobs at the cooperative were in high demand, and we quickly agreed on a price of $800. As Mrs. Lewis handed me the money, I hesitated, then asked if they might also be interested in buying the small house that the cooperative had assigned to my father. Mrs. Lewis looked surprised. "You're selling your house too? Then where will you and your sister live?" I plan to take Lucy back to my mother's side of the family, I said. Mrs. Lewis was startled. What about you and Eric? She asked. Then she seemed to realize something, sighed softly, and stepped outside to talk with her brother. After a while, they came back and decided to buy my house for $200. After receiving the money, I told Mrs. Lewis I hoped she could keep my sale a secret for now, and not tell anyone that I had sold my job at the cooperative. She nodded in agreement. My father had just passed away, and I still had 3 days of bereavement leave. I wasn't due to report back to the cooperative for another 3 days. Just enough time to settle everything. When Lucy and I returned home, I could already hear children laughing inside from a distance. My heart sank. I hurried forward with Lucy and nearly fainted at the sight before me. After my father's funeral, friends and relatives had brought over many gifts along with some of my parents' keepsakes. Fearing that things might be stolen from our old house, I had moved all of them into Eric's home for safekeeping. But now my parents' belongings were scattered all over the floor, thrown around by Hannah's 3 children. The only photo of my parents together, taken while they were alive, had been tossed into a bucket of urine, soaked and ruined beyond repair. A loud ringing filled my ears as rage surged through me. I raised my hand and slapped Hannah Collins hard across the face. "Get out!" I shouted. But before I could step back, a strong force shoved me violently. My lower back hit the edge of the table and pain shot through my body. Eric rushed forward and lifted Hannah's face in a panic. Seeing the red imprint of 5 fingers on her cheek, he turned on me with blazing fury. "Hannah, have you lost your mind? It's the middle of the night. Apologize to Hannah now." I glared at him coldly. She's the one who should apologize. Who gave her permission to touch my parents' belongings? Hannah lowered her head pitifully. "Eric told me to take some things," she murmured. Eric quickly nodded. "That's right. Hannah said she's moving soon, and her mother-in-law won't let her take anything from the house. She'd have to leave empty-handed. I told her she could come here and borrow a few things for now." My eyes burned with tears as I reached into the bucket, pulling out the ruined photo of my parents. I held it up in front of Eric. "Borrow what exactly?" I said through clenched teeth. Did she need to throw my parents' picture into a bucket of urine to borrow something too, Hannah Collins? "Say something," I demanded. Hannah Collins hadn't expected such a fierce reaction from me. Her face turned pale as she stammered. "It's my fault. I shouldn't have put the picture frame on the 5-drawer cabinet. The kids were probably just playing around and accidentally knocked it over." When Eric saw my parents' photo floating in a bucket of urine, he realized how serious this was. But as always, he instinctively took Hannah's side. After hearing her explanation, he immediately turned on me, his tone full of irritation. "You're overreacting. The kids are young. They didn't mean it. It's just a photo that got ruined. Find the negative and I'll get 10 new copies printed tomorrow." "Will that be enough?" "There isn't a negative," I said coldly, clutching the soaked picture of my parents. I stood up and looked straight at him. "Eric Thompson, I want a divorce." Hearing me calmly say those 2 words, divorce, made him freeze completely. His expression turned from shock to panic. "Anna," he said in a trembling voice, "I know you're upset right now. I promise I'll make this right. It's late. You and Lucy should rest. I'll walk Hannah home." The door slammed shut behind him. Lucy burst into tears. "Sister," she sobbed. "I don't like her. Can we go back to our own house?" I nodded silently, took the photo out of its broken frame, and gently wiped away the yellow stains with a dry cloth. Then I led Lucy to pick up everything scattered across the floor. In the corner of the room were 2 large bundles. I opened them and found all the expensive gifts our relatives and friends had brought after Father's funeral: powdered milk, brown sugar, cotton fabric, candy, and cookies. My heart twisted with bitterness. So, this was what Eric Thompson had been planning all along. Not only giving my house to Hannah Collins, not only trying to hand her my job at the cooperative, but even allowing her to rummage through my parents' belongings as if they were hers. Why? I grabbed one of the bundles and started knocking on doors one after another. I spent the entire night selling whatever I could to the neighbors. My parents' keepsakes I wrapped carefully and packed away to take with me later. I planned to ask a friend at the cooperative to hold them temporarily until Lucy and I could leave for good. Eric didn't come home that night, and I no longer cared whether he did or not. The next morning, after walking Lucy to school, I went straight to the slaughterhouse. I found the factory manager and demanded Eric's unpaid salary for the past year. In front of everyone, I raised my voice. My husband's been working here for a year, and our family can barely afford food. When is the factory going to pay him? It's been almost a year of unpaid wages. The manager slammed his desk and shouted, "Our factory has never owed anyone's wages." I widened my eyes and pretended to look frightened. "But my husband's the accountant here and he hasn't brought home a single paycheck all year." "Isn't that because the factory hasn't paid him?" The manager immediately called for someone to fetch Eric. When he arrived and heard that I'd come to the factory asking for his salary, his face flushed bright red. He grabbed my hand and tried to drag me outside, but I yanked my arm free and shouted loudly in front of the manager and all the workers, "My husband earns $35 a month and hasn't brought home a single cent. Are you seriously telling me your factory hasn't paid him? I suggest you pay me his full year salary right now, or believe me, I'll go straight to the county office and report you." The manager's face turned dark with fury. He glared at Eric as if he could eat him alive. "Eric Thompson," he barked, "has the factory ever owed you wages? You're the accountant? You should know that better than anyone. I don't care if you've been hiding money for yourself or secretly giving it to your mother. Go get the money right now and give it to your wife." At that moment, the workers around us began whispering. "So that's what kind of man our accountant is," someone muttered. "He makes $35 a month and doesn't give his wife a single penny. Poor Mrs. Thompson," another said. "Her husband works at a slaughterhouse surrounded by meat every day, yet she looks so thin and frail. What a shame." "You don't know the half of it," another voice joined in. "I've seen him carry meat to the widow Collins's house more than once after work. No wonder he's been fooling around with her." Everyone around was whispering, "His salary is all in the widow's hands now." The murmur spread through the room, and Eric Thompson looked like he wanted to sink into the ground. But that money, he had already spent it all on Hannah Collins. When I was picking vegetable leaves from the market floor early in the morning, he and Hannah were eating braised pork at the state-run restaurant. When I was mending my old cotton jacket, he was buying a fashionable wool coat for her. When I was collecting pieces of coal by the train tracks, he was buying her a brand new hot water bottle. Eric always said Hannah's life was hard, raising 2 children alone without a husband. But he never once looked at his own wife, who barely had enough to eat, shivering through winter in rags, looking more like a beggar than a woman. But now this beggar was going to take back every penny that shameless pair owed me. Seeing that I wouldn't leave, Eric grew nervous. He lowered his voice and tried to coax me. "Anna, let's talk about this at home, okay? If it's about the money, I'll give you all my salary starting next month." "All right." I shook my head firmly. "No, I want the wages you've already earned. If you don't give them to me, I'll go to the county or even to the province and raise hell. You go to work every day but you never bring home a cent. This ruins your job, so be it. We can both go back to the village and farm." Eric's face went pale, his lips trembling as he stared at me in disbelief. "Anna, are you really going to be this heartless?" I looked him straight in the eye and said calmly, "It's you and Hannah Collins who forced me into this." Remembering our years as husband and wife, I softened my tone slightly. "I'll give you one day. Tomorrow at this same time, I'll come back here to collect your wages. You haven't brought home your salary for a whole year. Even if there were no bonuses, your base pay is $35 a month. That's $420 a year. If there's even a single dime missing, I'll report you and your manager for corruption." The moment I said that, the manager's face turned stiff. In the 70s, embezzlement was punished severely, sometimes even by execution. I knew the slaughterhouse had plenty of under-the-table dealings, and the manager himself was surely not innocent. His eyes blazed with fury as he glared at Eric. "Get into my office now." When the manager finally came out, Eric was clutching a thick envelope in his hands. Without saying a word, he threw it into my lap. $420, every cent counted if you don't believe me. I looked down at the thick stack of money and for a moment I could see the pain twisting in his face. To get rid of me, the manager had forced him to take an advance on his entire salary for the coming year. That meant for the next 12 months, Eric wouldn't have a single dollar to his name, and he'd no longer be able to give anything to Hannah Collins. I tucked the money carefully into my bag, then raised my head and said clearly, "I have one more condition. Divorce me." Eric's eyes widened in disbelief. "I already agreed to give you my salary. What more do you want?" I met his gaze steadily. "If you won't divorce me, then the next time you step foot in Hannah Collins's house, I'll take people there and catch you in the act. You wouldn't want your precious Hannah to become the town's laughingstock branded as an adulteress, would you?" At the mention of Hannah's name, Eric flinched like a cat whose tail had been stepped on. He jumped up defensively, insisting, "Hannah and I are innocent. There's nothing between us." I gave a faint, cold smile. "Then tell me this, Eric Thompson. Can you honestly promise never to see Hannah Collins again?" He fell silent, my cold stare making him squirm in shame. Yet, he still clenched his jaw stubbornly and refused to file for divorce. I didn't want to be tied to him any longer. My mind was already set on leaving. I focused on preparing everything for our departure to my mother's hometown in the next town over. After my grandmother passed away, the old house had been empty for years. Luckily, I'd already sold my job at the cooperative. With the money I had earned from selling my job and the full salary I had forced out of Eric Thompson, I finally had a decent amount saved up. That morning, I went to my mother's hometown and paid $50 to hire a few people to help repair the old family house. Then, I completed the paperwork to transfer Lucy to a new school nearby. On the final day, I rented an ox cart and carefully loaded all our luggage onto it. Just as I was about to leave, Eric appeared at the gate, walking side by side with Hannah Collins, who was carrying her little daughter in her arms. The three of them were laughing happily together. When Eric saw me standing in the yard beside the cart, he froze in his tracks. His eyes widened as if he couldn't believe what he was seeing. "Anna," he stammered, "you really mean to leave?" "I agreed to the divorce." I glanced at Hannah behind him, then suddenly said, "We don't have to divorce. If you write me a statement saying that from now on, you'll never see Hannah Collins again and never give her money or gifts of any kind. If you can promise me that, I'll stay and try to live with you peacefully." I looked at Hannah again. Deep down, I knew that woman would never let go of Eric Thompson, the fool who showered her with money. Sure enough, Eric hesitated only for a moment before Hannah's eyes filled with tears. She looked at him pitifully and said, "Eric, I'm sorry for causing you trouble. Go calm Anna down. You two should live a good life together. Don't worry about me and my kids anymore. I'm just an unlucky woman who never met a good man like you." She covered her face dramatically and ran off crying. Eric looked at me, then at Hannah's retreating figure torn between us. Finally, he stamped his foot in frustration. "I'll go check on her," he muttered. "I'll be right back." Without another glance, he turned and chased after her down the road. I didn't even watch him leave. I led Lucy onto the cart and moved into my grandmother's old house. By the late 1970s, small towns had begun to see a bit of trade and business. I set up a small stall in an alley near Lucy's new school. Then I took the train to the provincial wholesale market and brought back a large supply of hair clips, earrings, scarves, and stylish hats. No matter the time or place, women's money is always the easiest to earn. Within half a year, I had made my first real profit as a street vendor and bought a small storefront near Lucy's school. The following year, I opened the first private general store in the town. The two rooms on the left side sold clothes and shoes, while the right side carried accessories and little trinkets. I imported most of the clothing from the southern provinces, modern, fashionable styles, and stocked matching leather shoes and handbags that sold fast. Customers from neighboring towns came to shop. The accessory section, though cheaper, brought in even higher profits. A year later, with my earnings from the store, I bought 2 more storefronts in the county and opened another clothing and accessories shop. Within a few years, my stores had expanded all the way to the provincial capital. Around that time, I unexpectedly received a letter from Mrs. Lewis, the former supervisor of the cooperative. It turned out that the cooperative in my old town had been losing money for years, and the higher-ups had decided to shut it down. While cleaning out the storage rooms, they had found several of my father's belongings and asked if I wanted to retrieve them. I wrote back immediately, "Yes, I'll come at once." That afternoon, I asked my driver to take me in my newly purchased Santana sedan back to town. I hadn't expected to see Eric Thompson again at the cooperative. He looked much older than before, carrying a large sack while arguing with a group of elderly people at the entrance. The cooperative was clearing out unsold goods, leftover stock being sold off at clearance prices. Eric had managed to grab a few cheap pairs of cracked, peeling shoes and some mismatched plates and chopsticks. When he caught sight of me, his eyes widened in shock. He staggered toward me on an uneven gait. I noticed he was limping and couldn't help but ask quietly, "What happened to your leg?" Eric gave a bitter laugh and said, "It happened at the slaughterhouse." Eric said with a bitter smile, "A pig stomped on my leg and broke it." As it turned out, after I caused that scene at the slaughterhouse all those years ago, the manager had taken advantage of the situation to remove Eric Thompson from his position as accountant and replace him with one of his own relatives. Eric was reassigned to work directly on the slaughter line. But he was a frail, bookish man. He didn't have the strength for that kind of work. Not long after, because he didn't tie a pig down properly, it went wild. The person who got hurt the worst was Eric. He had been standing too close when the animal went berserk and trampled him, breaking one of his legs and 2 ribs. When he finally recovered, the manager refused to let him return to the slaughter line. Instead, he was reassigned as a gatekeeper. Everyone else at the factory got a raise, but Eric's monthly salary was cut from $35 to $20. And yet, despite his fall from grace, Hannah Collins was still the same as ever. She often showed up with her 2 kids, demanding that Eric take them out to the state-owned restaurant for a meal. She made him buy her jeans, floral blouses, and stylish leather shoes. Of course, his $20 paycheck was never enough to satisfy her. I didn't know what on earth he was thinking, but one day he remembered the job my father had left me. He actually took Hannah to the cooperative, claiming that since I had moved away, my father's position should be inherited by him, and that Hannah could take my place. The people at the cooperative burst into laughter. Then Mrs. Lewis, the supervisor, told him the truth. I had sold the job long ago, and even the house that came with it had been sold to her family. When Eric realized both the job and the house were gone, Hannah panicked. With nothing else to cling to, she pressured him to marry her. But by then, Eric was already starting to regret ever getting involved with her. Hannah Collins was lazy, selfish, and wasteful with 2 children to feed. Deep down, Eric knew that if he really married her, his $20 salary would never be enough to support the whole family. But Hannah was manipulative. First, she cried and told him her mother-in-law couldn't stand her anymore, and was planning to marry her off to some widower much older than her. Eric, soft-hearted as always, pitied her and let Hannah and her 2 children move in with him temporarily. He didn't expect what would happen next. The very next day, Hannah cooked him a lavish dinner and got him drunk. Later that night, others accidentally discovered the 2 of them sleeping in the same bed. After that, Eric had no choice but to marry her. Hearing all this, I couldn't help but laugh. Well, isn't that perfect? Congratulations. The 2 of you, so in love, finally became husband and wife. Eric's eyes darkened. She's not like you, he muttered. Hannah's not the kind of woman who knows how to live properly. After their marriage, Hannah stayed home every day, eating well, dressing up, and waiting for Eric's paycheck at the end of each month. But when payday finally came, she discovered the truth. To get our divorce, Eric had already taken an advance on his entire year's salary. That meant for the next 12 months, he would still be working but wouldn't receive a single dollar. Hannah's attitude changed immediately. She exploded, screaming and fighting with him. But Eric no longer spoiled her the way he once had. He snapped back at her coldly. "Didn't I already give you all my salary? You're the one who wasted it without saving a penny. Now that there's no money left, how dare you blame me?" With no cash for rice or vegetables, Hannah was forced to sell the sweater, wristwatch, gold ring, and leather shoes that Eric had once bought her. But with 2 children still in school, the money ran out quickly, and soon the family was starving again. Desperate, Eric started doing what many others at the slaughterhouse did: secretly stealing small portions of pork or offal to sell on the black market for extra money. But good fortune never lasts. Before long, the factory noticed discrepancies in their inventory. After an investigation, a whole group of workers, including Eric Thompson, was fired. After being dismissed from the slaughterhouse, he not only received no severance pay but also owed more than $300 from the advance he had taken earlier. The factory demanded that he repay the full amount within a year. To make money, Eric was forced to take on heavy manual labor. Not long after, under his scolding and beatings, Hannah Collins, who had always lived a pampered life, finally started working temporary jobs around town, mending clothes for people, collecting scraps, and gluing paper boxes. But she was never one who could endure hardship. In less than 6 months while Eric was away from home, she took the $200 he had painstakingly saved and ran off with a peddler from out of town. Hannah ran away with her lover, abandoning Eric completely. Strangely, instead of anger, he felt a kind of relief. He brought her 2 children to their grandparents' house and explained clearly that he was only their stepfather. If even their biological mother didn't want them, then he certainly had no obligation to raise someone else's children. At this point, Eric looked at me with deep emotion in his eyes. "Anna," he said softly, "I finally see things clearly now. I've seen the true face of that woman, Hannah Collins. I swear I'll never look for her again. I've already sent her kids away. Anna, please forgive me. Take me back, will you? Or let me come with you to the city. I'll do whatever you say. Every dollar I earn I'll give to you." I shook my head, unwilling to waste another word on him, and turned toward the cooperative building. Behind me, I could hear the laughter and jeers of the crowd that had gathered around. "That old fool Eric Thompson really has no shame," someone said. "A washed-up man digging through trash, thinking he could marry the lady who drives a car. Don't you know?" Another voice chimed in. "That lady is his ex-wife. Back in the day, he cheated on her with a widow and drove his own wife out of the house. Look at him now. Serves him right. If he'd stayed faithful, he'd be the one riding in that car today." Laughter rippled through the crowd. Eric suddenly dropped to his knees, covered his face, and began to sob uncontrollably. I walked into the cooperative storage room and saw the belongings my father had left behind. There was a group photo from when he represented the cooperative in a ping-pong tournament. Another of him competing in a counting contest. In the crowd of one picture, I even spotted my mother when she was young and myself just a baby in her arms. Holding the precious photographs, I thanked Mrs. Lewis again and again. She blushed and explained that they had gone through a lot of trouble to recover my father's belongings. "Anna," she said, "the higher-ups are shutting down our town's cooperative station. We're all about to lose our jobs. I heard you're running a successful business now with several stores. Maybe you could let some of our sales staff try out at one of your shops. Don't worry, we'll follow the proper hiring process. Whether they stay or not will depend on their abilities. I wouldn't want to put you in a difficult position." I smiled, glanced around at the now empty cooperative and said, "Actually, I didn't just come back to retrieve my father's things. I plan to buy these 3 storefronts from the cooperative, renovate them, and open a new branch here. Mrs. Lewis, would you like to keep working with me?" Her eyes widened in surprise. I told her my plan. She would handle the internal evaluations first. Any sales clerks who were lazy or rude to customers would be dismissed, but those who were competent would be sent to nearby branches for training. Once they passed their probation, they could return to work here after the new branch was renovated and ready. Hearing my arrangement, Mrs. Lewis thanked me repeatedly and warmly invited me to her home for dinner. Coincidentally, I had been wanting to visit my old house anyway. I followed Mrs. Lewis back to the old housing compound of the cooperative. It was still the same narrow 3-story building as before. The 2 osmanthus trees in the front courtyard that had once barely reached my height were now taller than the 2nd floor. After having dinner at Mrs. Lewis's home, I stepped outside and to my surprise, the driver waiting by the car had turned out to be my husband, Ethan Miller. Ethan was wearing a steel gray coat, his eyes soft and warm as he looked at me. I ran a few steps toward him and threw myself into his arms, looking up at him with a smile. "What are you doing here? Where's the driver?" He chuckled. "I gave him 2 days off. It's been a while since we've come back to your hometown, so I thought I'd take you out for a couple of days." For the next 2 days, we stayed at Mrs. Lewis's house. I took Ethan to visit the school where Lucy and I had studied when we were young, and we ate local breakfast specialties at the morning market. When we walked past the old slaughterhouse, I heard it had gone bankrupt several years ago. I pointed at the rusted iron gates and said with a laugh, "That's the place where my ex-husband used to work. Back then, he gave all his wages to a widow, and I caused such a scene there that it led to our divorce." Ethan burst out laughing, pulled me into his arms and kissed me deeply. "Well, thank goodness your ex was blind," he said with a grin. "Otherwise, I'd never have had the chance to find you." I laughed with him, but out of the corner of my eye, I caught sight of a familiar figure. Along the cracked wall of the abandoned slaughterhouse, someone was limping away slowly. Eric Thompson. Goodbye. We'll never meet again.